Minister, your department, the IGES unit, the Government Economic and Evaluation Service, produced a report on planning permissions and housing supply at the end of last year. The evidence that it produces directly counters the narrative of the government around the issue of planning. The government again and again says the problem is there's too many planning objections. That's why we can't ramp up housing supply. Your own department produces a document that says that's absolutely not the case and identifies land banking, speculation and viability issues as the problem. So I just wonder, have you any comment on that? And have you relayed these findings to your colleagues in government?
Thanks very much, Deputy Boyd Barrett, for raising this important question. And housing policy is written by the Minister for Housing and the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government. IGES staff in deeper carry out research in a broad range of areas affecting expenditure. And while this informs the evidence base that is provided by officials in ministerial briefings, housing policy is developed in the first instance by and implemented by the Department of Housing. The Irish Government Economic and Evaluation Service is an integrated cross-government service which seeks to enhance the role of analytics analysis in evidence in public policy making. And the two housing analytical notes published last December are independent pieces of research conducted by IGES staff in the department. IGES staff in Deeper regularly undertake research, producing papers and analytical notes to contribute to the evidence base which are used to be in policy discussions, dialogue with other departments and to support informed policy making. The planning permissions and housing supply analytic notes seeks to broaden the evidence base underpinning the planning process by examining refusal rates, decision times and planning appeals used in available data. It also discusses the relationship between planning permission and recent trends in housing supply. More broadly, drawing on the available data as well as the existing research and literature on this topic. A key finding from this research highlights the need for improved quality of planning data and for further research to be conducted to provide clear insights on the planning processes and the impacts of commencements and delivery. The second housing analytical note, review of the Rebuilding Ireland Home Loan 2018 to 21, examines the activity and take-up of Rebuilding Ireland, now replaced by the Local Authority Home Loan Scheme. These findings highlighted the strong demand for the scheme and also demonstrated the important role the scheme has played in supporting 2,629 home purchases for lower income earners between February of 18 and December of 21, with a further 5,400 receiving approval in principle. All of the work carried out by IGES within the department forms the evidence base which officials use to inform the Minister prior to any meeting he attends, including cabinet meetings and policy discussions he engages on. Research and findings such as those have been seen in two housing analytical notes form part of the briefings and he has received to date on housing relating matters.
Okay, well, number one, you haven't answered the question. Do you pass on this information that your department gathers to the people who develop housing policy? And then you give a very interesting summary of the document, which I'm beginning to suspect you haven't read yourself, which says, the document says we need more documents with more data. Now, that's not what it says. It mentions that. It says more study would be useful. But what it actually says is that 85% of all planning applications are granted. In rural Ireland, it's more like 90 to 95%, but it's almost everywhere more than 70%, usually more like 80%, an average of 85%. But what it says is, there's loads of planning permissions given for apartments, for houses, but they're not commenced. They're not commenced. And then it says, we're not exactly sure why this is, but it's definitely not to do with planning objections, but it's probably to do with land banking, speculation and viability issues.
So maybe whatever about me reading it, I don't know whether you listened to me, because I read it out again. The Irish Government Economic and Evaluation Service is an integrated cross-government service which seeks to enhance the role of analysis evidence-based in public policy making. It's a cross-government, so that means there's more than one department involved in it. And I also said, and I went on to say, that it informs the Minister's engagements in meetings, including the cabinet meetings. Now, just in relation to what you said about planning permissions, it is important to point out that the counties in the Greater Dublin area, and this is after the report, and those containing large urban centres tended to have the highest refusal rates. Refusing rates across local authorities range from 37% in Kildare to 4% in Tipperary. Now, 37% refusal rates, Deputy, is quite a large amount of refusals in the context of the total number of housing units that are needed. Now, I know some people in this House make a virtue out of objecting to planning permissions. And I think they need to take a look at themselves and maybe their political ideologies, that you can't build a private house on private land and make a profit. Because if that doesn't happen, and I've been in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform now in 3 different roles for the last 7 years, and I've been here for all of the oral questions, and the mantra doesn't change from your side, Deputy, which really underpins your philosophical and ideological opposition to people building their own houses.
Yeah, again, you really should read the report, Minister, because first of all it says that actually single dwellings, the grant rate is much, much higher, and particularly in rural Ireland. It's almost always over 90%. So the mantra that planning objectors are slowing down planning applications being granted in rural Ireland for single dwellings, just not true. Just not true, right? But even in the highest refusal rates, it's 70%, more likely 80%. But then they ask, how is it, for example, in Dublin, they're planning permissions for 42,000 and rising, constantly rising, but only about 4,000 to 5,000 apartments actually being built. And they say it is likely that this is because people are getting planning permission to increase the value of their asset and speculating on those assets, and that they are banking land. And yet you do nothing about that, but you keep on jumping up and down about planning.
Thank you.
As someone who represents one of those rural counties that you seem to have such a knowledge of, the actual number of houses that are granted planning permission is tiny relative to what's actually needed from a once-off basis. And yeah, while the percentage, and the last count Corla and Deputy Conway Walsh will know what I'm talking about as well, the number of one-off houses in rural areas compared to schemes of houses that are built is minuscule. So the refusal rate, naturally enough, is going to be smaller. But the overall refusal rate for planning permissions is standing at 15%. And just in the context of apartments, what you said there a while ago, the number of completed apartments has grown from 2,258 in 2018 to over 5,000 in 2021, and the other data will be available for 22 shortly. So progress is being made in this area, Deputy, and I know that you have an ideological opposition to what it is that we're trying to do, and you enunciate it every time, and it never changes, and I appreciate that.